The boardroom doors burst open just as security guards grabbed the man by the arms. Every executive around the massive conference table watched as a tired-looking single father in an inexpensive jacket was escorted toward the exit like an intruder. The CEO sat at the head of the room with a look of annoyance, convinced the meeting had finally been restored to order. After all, the company was preparing to approve a multi-billion-dollar expansion, and the last thing she wanted was an uninvited guest disrupting the presentation. But everything changed when the company's oldest board member suddenly stood up and turned pale. His eyes locked onto the father being thrown out. Then, in a trembling voice that silenced the room, he asked a question that would change everything. "Do any of you have the slightest idea who that man is?" Nobody answered. The room remained frozen. The board member swallowed hard and pointed toward the father. "You're throwing out the man who invented the product that built this entire company." Within seconds, panic replaced confidence. Executives jumped from their seats. Security stopped moving. The CEO's face lost all color. Because the man she had just humiliated wasn't a trespasser. He was the forgotten genius responsible for the company's greatest success, and they had just thrown him out of his own legacy. 15 years earlier, Michael Carter had been one of the brightest engineers in the technology industry. Long before investors flooded startups with money and long before corporate executives took credit for innovations they didn't understand, Michael was a young inventor working from a cramped apartment while raising a newborn daughter with his wife, Emily. He spent countless nights building prototypes, testing designs, and solving problems that larger companies considered impossible. While others chased quick profits, Michael cared about creating technology that genuinely improved people's lives. Eventually, after years of sacrifice, he developed a revolutionary software-hardware system that transformed how businesses managed communication and logistics. Industry experts initially dismissed the idea. Investors laughed. Competitors ignored him. But one small company recognized the invention's potential and offered him a partnership. Desperate to support his growing family, Michael accepted a modest agreement and helped launch the product. Within a few years, it became a global success, generating hundreds of millions of dollars and transforming the startup into one of the most respected corporations in the country. Life should have become easier after that success, but fate had different plans. Shortly after the product launched, Emily became seriously ill. Suddenly, Michael's priorities changed. Board meetings, presentations, and executive opportunities no longer mattered. Every available moment was spent beside hospital beds and medical specialists. As treatment costs increased and Emily's condition worsened, Michael quietly sold portions of his ownership rights to cover expenses and focus entirely on his family. By the time Emily passed away, he had stepped almost completely away from the company he helped build. Most employees never met him. New executives arrived. Leadership changed. The company's history became a collection of polished corporate stories that focused more on growth than on the people who made it possible. Michael disappeared from public attention and dedicated himself to raising his daughter, Sophie, alone. While the corporation expanded into a billion-dollar empire, the inventor behind its greatest innovation lived a simple life, working as an independent consultant and doing everything he could to be both mother and father to the little girl who remained his entire world. Years passed, and the company grew faster than anyone imagined. Massive headquarters replaced the original office. Thousands of employees joined the organization. Sophisticated marketing campaigns celebrated executives as visionaries. Among those executives was Victoria Reynolds, a brilliant but highly ambitious CEO who had taken over leadership several years earlier. Victoria was known for her intelligence and relentless drive, but she also had a weakness. She judged people quickly. In her world, success had a specific appearance. Expensive suits suggested competence. Luxury vehicles signaled achievement. Prestigious titles commanded respect. Ordinary people rarely received a second glance. Unfortunately, this mindset slowly created a culture where appearances mattered almost as much as results. As long as profits increased, few people questioned it. Yet hidden beneath the company's polished image was a dangerous truth. Many employees no longer understood the values that originally built the business. They celebrated success while forgetting the sacrifices that made success possible. And that disconnect was about to collide with Michael Carter in the most dramatic way imaginable. The conflict began when the company announced plans for a modular expansion based on the very technology Michael had originally invented. Investors, executives, and board members prepared for a high-profile strategy meeting that would determine the company's future direction. Unknown to most people, one of the aging board members had recently contacted Michael and invited him to attend. The board member believed the company had drifted too far from its original mission and wanted the inventor's perspective before approving changes that could affect millions of customers. Michael hesitated. He disliked corporate environments and had no interest in returning to the spotlight. But after discussing the opportunity with Sophie, who had grown into a thoughtful young woman, he agreed. She reminded him that sometimes people needed to hear the truth from those who built something, not merely those who inherited it. Michael smiled and promised he would attend. The morning of the meeting, life immediately complicated his plans. Sophie's car broke down on the way to an important university interview. Michael spent hours helping her solve the problem before driving her across town himself. By the time he finished, he was running late. He barely had time to change clothes and arrived at corporate headquarters wearing simple jeans, a worn jacket, and carrying an old messenger bag filled with notes. Compared to the executives arriving in luxury cars and tailored suits, he looked completely out of place. Employees in the lobby assumed he was a delivery driver. Receptionists barely looked at him. Yet Michael didn't care. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He simply wanted to contribute his perspective and leave. Unfortunately, before he even reached the boardroom, several managers began questioning his presence. Their skepticism grew when they learned he lacked a corporate title. By the time he entered the meeting floor, rumors were already spreading that an unauthorized visitor had somehow slipped past security. Victoria noticed him almost immediately. While presentations were being prepared, she glanced across the room and saw a middle-aged man sitting quietly near the back of the conference area. His appearance clashed with everything she expected from high-level corporate leadership. Without bothering to ask questions, she assumed someone had made a mistake. She approached several managers, demanded an explanation, and quickly concluded that the man did not belong there. When Michael calmly explained that he had been invited, Victoria interpreted his response as an excuse. The board member who had invited him had stepped out briefly to take an urgent call, leaving nobody available to confirm the truth. Irritated by what she viewed as an unnecessary disruption, Victoria ordered security to remove him immediately. The room watched as guards approached Michael. Despite the humiliation, he remained calm. He gathered his notes, thanked the guards for doing their jobs, and quietly walked toward the exit. Some executives smirked. Others avoided eye contact. Nobody intervened. The humiliation deepened as employees throughout the building witnessed the scene. Security escorted Michael through the lobby while whispers followed behind him. People assumed he was a protester, a disgruntled former worker, or someone attempting to gain access to executives. Nobody imagined they were watching the man responsible for the company's most valuable invention. What hurt most wasn't the embarrassment itself. It was the realization that the organization he helped create had forgotten its own history. 15 years of sacrifice, innovation, and personal loss had been reduced to a moment where strangers judged him solely by his appearance. As he approached the exit, Michael briefly considered leaving for good. Perhaps his daughter had been wrong. Perhaps there was no point trying to help a company that no longer remembered where it came from. Then everything changed. The elderly board member returned to the conference room and immediately noticed the commotion. After learning what happened, he demanded that security stop. His voice carried a level of authority nobody could ignore. As confusion spread throughout the room, he began explaining exactly who Michael Carter was. One by one, executives learned details they had never heard before. The original patents, the breakthrough innovation, the years of unpaid work, the sacrifices made to keep the company alive during its earliest struggles. The product generating billions in revenue wasn't created by a committee or executive team. It was created by the very man they had just thrown out. Silence consumed the room. Victoria's confidence evaporated as she realized she had publicly humiliated the person most responsible for the company's existence. The board member wasn't finished. He ordered historical records displayed on the conference screens. Old photographs appeared showing a younger Michael working alongside the company's founders. Patent documents filled the monitors. Early development videos played for the room. Suddenly, the forgotten inventor became impossible to ignore. Executives who had spent years celebrating the company's achievements discovered that the man they dismissed possessed more legitimate claim to its success than anyone sitting at the table. Several board members looked visibly angry. Others seemed embarrassed. Victoria sat motionless as the full weight of her mistakes settled over the room. The problem wasn't merely that she had judged someone unfairly. The problem was that she had revealed a deeper cultural issue infecting the organization. A company founded on innovation and perseverance had begun valuing appearances over substance. Board members immediately instructed security to bring Michael back. When he re-entered the room, the atmosphere felt completely different. The same executives who had ignored him now stood respectfully. Some even applauded. Victoria rose from her seat and walked toward him. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then she did something few powerful leaders are willing to do. She apologized publicly, not with excuses, not with corporate language. She admitted that she had been arrogant, judgmental, and wrong. She acknowledged that she failed to ask questions before making assumptions and that her actions reflected poorly on the entire organization. The apology was genuine, and everyone in the room knew it. Yet what happened next surprised them even more. Michael accepted. He explained that mistakes become valuable when people learn from them. Holding resentment wouldn't help anyone. Learning from the experience might. The remainder of the meeting transformed into something nobody expected. Instead of discussing expansion plans immediately, executives listened as Michael shared lessons from the company's earliest days. He spoke about perseverance during failure, about treating people with dignity regardless of status, and about remembering that innovation often comes from ordinary individuals working quietly behind the scenes. His words resonated throughout the room because they weren't theories. They were lived experiences. For hours, the company rediscovered principles it had gradually forgotten. By the time the meeting ended, board members unanimously approved a series of cultural changes designed to ensure respect and humility remained central to the organization's future. Several months later, a new section of headquarters opened dedicated to the company's history. At its center stood an exhibit honoring the inventors, engineers, and employees whose sacrifices built the business. Michael's story became a permanent part of that legacy. More importantly, the company began evaluating people differently. Employees were encouraged to focus less on appearances and more on character, creativity, and contribution. Victoria herself became one of the strongest advocates for that change. The humiliation she experienced that day never left her, but neither did the lesson. Sometimes the most important people in the room are the ones nobody notices. As for Michael, he returned to his quiet life. He continued consulting, spending time with Sophie, and helping young inventors avoid the mistakes he had made. He never sought fame, recognition, or revenge. Knowing the company had remembered its roots was enough. And perhaps that's the real lesson hidden within this story. The world often encourages us to judge quickly based on appearances, titles, and status. But greatness rarely announces itself. Sometimes it arrives wearing a worn jacket, carrying an old bag, and asking for nothing more than a chance to be heard. If this story reminded you to look beyond appearances and appreciate the value hidden within ordinary people, then its message has already succeeded. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment about the lesson that resonated with you most.